Good evening. Welcome to Reflections on East Granby. My name is Mike Malloy, and I'll be your host this evening. Our guest tonight is Kenneth Nadler, a 46-year resident of East Granby. He's 67 years old. He lives at 143 South Main Street with his wife, Dorothy. He'll be our guest this evening, and thank you for joining us. How you
Thank
doing
you,
tonight,
Mike.
Ken? How's it going? Okay, so you moved to, we usually start out just kind of with a little bit of background on our guests, just to kind of get a reference of who they are and what they're, where they're coming from. You were born
in Utica, New York,
in 1944.
44. Yes.
So you were like almost a pre-baby boom baby.
Exactly.
Just
yeah.
on the onset.
My father worked in the defense industries. He was a metallurgist and chemist.
Okay.
And was involved with Savage Arms. You know, during the Second War, things.
A lot of
they
guns.
needed people. Yep.
Yeah.
And we stayed in Utica until I was preschool. I moved to Elmira, New York.
Okay.
And when I was for the sake of discussion, in the 5th grade, we moved to Newington, Connecticut.
Okay.
Again, my dad took a job locally with the defense industry. And lived in Newington until I graduated high school. In the middle of the year, we moved to southern Maine, to Saco, Maine. And I finished my last year of high school there.
Okay. Now, jumping back to Utica real quick, do you have many memories of Utica?
No, I moved from there as a very young person.
And what would be your earliest memory? What town would that be?
Elmira, New York.
So you went from Utica to Elmira
to Newington, Connecticut.
So Elmira, you were how old?
It was preschool.
Preschool, okay.
Yeah, and I honestly don't remember.
Yeah.
Had a great young childhood there. We lived in West Elmira, which was like West Granby is to Granby. It was rural, woods, river, Chemung River.
Where is Elmira?
Mid-state, right on the Pennsylvania border, midway east, in the middle of the state, between east-west.
Okay.
And it's right on the Pennsylvania border.
Okay.
And it was a nice place for young people to grow up.
So this would have been the early 50s.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was born in 44. Probably moved to Newington, and I honestly don't remember the year, but for the sake of discussion, we'll say 54, 55.
Okay. Do you have any memories of Elmira?
Oh, yes.
What are your earliest memories from there?
Mostly Tom Sawyer-ish.
Yeah.
Hanging with the guys along the river, which I wasn't allowed to go. They were it was a shale deposit.
Oh, wow.
Dinosaur tracks. It was really an adventurous.
Lots of cool stuff for a young kid.
For a young person.
Was it a big community? Elmira's a pretty big town.
Elmira and West Elmira, which I believe were a combined community, were substantial. There's a college there, well-known ladies' college. Okay. That's been there forever.
Right.
Mark Twain's family, he lived in Elmira.
Okay.
And there's another house in Hartford, a lady.
Harriet Beecher Stowe.
Yes, I hung around with Tommy Beecher, a great-great-grandson of Harriet Beecher Stowe.
So was Twain from Elmira?
I think he just lived there. I don't know his origin.
I just think it'd be kind of ironic if both of them were from the same area.
Well, I know that they had family there and they both lived there.
There was a connection.
Yeah, because as I mentioned, Tommy Beecher was a friend of mine as a youngster.
Okay. All right, so if you're growing up in Elmira and then you moved to
Newington, Connecticut.
So what are your
Newington was a change in that, like things have changed now. East Granby's changed to what it is now.
Right.
It was a much faster pace. We were discovering young ladies.
Yep.
Hot rods.
Right.
Much faster pace.
Right.
Good education. Elmira, interestingly enough, was an experimental community for the state of New York. It was one of 3 or 4 communities where they taught phonics. You learn to read and pronounce words by phonics. Okay. To this day, I can pronounce any word that's in front of me. May not know what it means.
Which they were just starting that?
Yes, it was a new concept.
Right. Interesting.
And Newington, ironically, was a progressive town at that time when I went to school there.
Yeah.
Now it's just another grind-em-out mill, like unfortunately too many larger communities have become. Too many kids.
They just pump them.
But it was a good experience growing up in Newington.
So you said 5th grade when you moved to Newington? Or?
More or less.
Yeah, okay,
I
no,
don't.
that-
I would say that's reasonably accurate.
So you went through high school?
That's
in
correct. Up
Newington?
until the middle of my last year.
Yeah.
And at that point, we moved to southern Maine, to Saco, and I finished the year there.
Okay.
And even though my college was paid for, I knew better.
Yeah.
And I went to work and got married.
Right. So when you left Newington and went to Saco, you're following a job for your dad, is that what?
That's
yeah,
correct.
Yeah.
You know, as a family, the family moved there.
Okay. What did your mom do? Was she?
She was a teacher. She'd actually taught in East Granby for a number of years.
Really?
Granby for a period of time, where she lived here in town.
Yeah.
And taught in East Granby.
Okay.
My brother substituted in East Granby.
Interesting.
Obviously, when my mother retired from teaching, she retired from East Granby School.
Wow.
Things were a lot different then.
Yeah, it was a different era. Yeah. Well, okay. So you're in Saco, Maine, and you've already graduated.
I graduated that year, the year we moved to Saco, Maine.
Okay.
And I went to work. I wasn't ready for college mentally. It wasn't in the books.
Right.
And I went to work in a boatyard, building.
In Maine.
Yeah,
Yep.
wooden pleasure craft, big boats.
Okay.
Worked in a machine shop, and I worked in. Ultimately, my father got me a job because he was involved. He was a big shot at this factory,
Right.
Saco Lowell, and they made machine gun, everything military.
Really?
Yeah, he was always because of the
the
heat
gun.
treating and the plating and the stuff that he was involved with. And I went to work there for a couple of years. And then my family decided to move back to Connecticut.
Okay.
And we followed them. By then I was married.
Okay.
And we
So you met your wife in Maine?
Yes, she was going to college. My wife's a little less than a year older than me.
Okay.
But she was a year ahead of me in school, and she was already in college. And we followed them back. We started our family.
In East Granby.
Yeah.
And so you moved from
Well, not
Saco.
100% true. They lived in my folks lived in West Granby.
Okay.
We rented an apartment in West Granby for a few years.
All right.
And when we were able, we bought our first home in East Granby.
Okay.
And I'm still in it.
Okay.
After all these years.
Right on 143 South Main Street.
That's correct.
Okay, so now that we're at that point, what were you doing for a living at the time? What was your...
I've always worked construction.
Okay.
In one phase or another.
So after you left the factory, you went into construction?
Yes.
Okay.
When we moved down here, I went to work as a carpenter's helper.
Okay.
Fellow from East Heartland. And we worked this general area. Nobody traveled back then.
So was the building boom kind of still going on at that time?
Well, I don't know. I'd hate to use the term boom. It was steady.
Okay.
People were building homes.
It wasn't the 50s, but it wasn't dead yet.
No, it was the early 60s.
Okay.
And eventually, I went to college nights. I worked as a carpenter's helper and eventually a carpenter days.
Okay.
Went to, when I think it's Northwestern Community College in Winstead opened, the year they opened, I started college there nights.
Okay.
And
What were you studying?
just starting, my first year, just general courses, English, writing, etc. And continued in construction. And eventually I worked my way up to be an estimator.
So wait a minute, you were working construction and going to college at night?
Yeah.
With the intention of pursuing...
Just getting an education.
You weren't
I didn't have a goal,
Okay, all right.
but I knew I didn't want to swing a hammer the rest of my life.
That's pretty motivated, though. I have to give you credit. I mean, a lot of guys get into a job and they just do it. They
Well, I've remained in the industry all of these years, and at 67, I'm still working construction.
Yeah.
My son and I work together. We install tile and marble,
Okay.
and we've been quite successful.
Okay.
Not monetarily so much, but as quality and the name.
Yeah.
Most of our work now, although we do little tiny jobs,
Yeah.
a lot of the average costs of homes that we work in range from $2 to $5 million. We're doing a doctor's home in Middlefield right now.
Okay.
We've got 2 in Essex to do, all these big, and they're very specialized.
The only houses being built right now are usually
People that can afford
spec-built houses that are...
and/or people that have money.
A lot of money.
Yeah. And it's not affecting them
Right.
to spend that money.
Right. So I didn't mean to jump you through,
That's
but
all right.
you were taking college courses at night, and you were
And
married,
working physically working as a carpenter.
and you had a couple children at that point.
One boy at that point.
Okay.
I Our work was somewhat seasonal,
Okay.
like farmers and
Like most
fishermen.
construction. Yeah.
And eventually, again, with my father's help, I got a job at an engineering company in Hartford, Henry Souther Engineering.
Okay.
And they were primarily a testing organization. They tested water, they tested steel, which is how my father was involved with them, sending steel samples over for various testing. Well, I got a job in their construction department, and I went to work, was taught, and went to work as a field inspector.
Oh, wow.
And at that time, they were building high-rises all over Hartford.
Right.
I was the head inspector eventually when they built New Departure in Bristol,
Okay.
which was a 1 million square foot building.
Right.
It was quite a project. And
So what would you actually test when you got out on the
I was
site?
testing concrete on site.
Okay.
I'm not going to go into details,
Yeah,
but
no, I'm just curious. Yeah.
they have what they call a slump test, which means the concrete can't be too wet.
Okay.
I was testing.
So you take a
was-
sample of the, and I won't get into
Exactly.
it. You take a sample of the
and you prepare
before
it.
it's poured.
You prepare it,
Before
and
it-
you can, through testing, examine how wet it is, and you
Okay.
can actually send the mixers off the job if there's too much water.
Okay.
The only thing weakens concrete is water.
So you were working for
The engineering company,
The engineering company. Okay.
who the architect and/or owner would hire to maintain quality control of their structure.
Okay. Right. Most people probably don't understand that whole process.
Well,
is in
that's
place.
the
Yeah,
reason.
Yeah.
I would check rebar. It had big sets of drawings. Some of these walls were 25, 30 feet high, and the spacing and the size and how they were tied. And eventually I used to walk steel and test with a torque wrench, the bolts.
So you were kind of like an in-process quality control guy.
Exactly.
You're making sure as it's before it's all covered up, you're making sure it's going to
It's
fly.
being done
It's being done
correctly.
right.
And one of the contractors on that site, a concrete contractor, at the latter part of the job, asked me if I'd like to go to work for them as an estimator and eventually project manager.
Okay.
And they were out of Dallas, Texas,
Yep.
and I did. And I traveled for 5 years. Excuse me, talking too much.
No, it's okay.
And I used to talking a lot, Mike.
That's
I traveled all over the East Coast running construction jobs for them.
Yep.
And then I was hired by a local GC,
Yep.
taught estimating for entire buildings, and that's what I did most of my life. I was an estimator, project manager in an office.
Right.
And when we would get enough work, I would go out and run jobs.
Right.
Big construction jobs.
So you became basically a foreman at some point.
Yeah, job super.
Yeah.
And I would have foremen for each trade working under me.
You were just making.
There was a plumbing foreman, an electrical foreman.
Just another form of quality control. right?
Exactly.
Making sure everything got
Exactly.
done right.
Coordination
Yeah.
and getting the jobs done on time.
Right. Okay, so then you evidently made your living doing that until what point?
21 years ago, my son, who had gone through the apprenticeship program as a tile setter, which was the Masons Union,
Yep.
went to work in the field setting tile, and was not happy with the way the unions operated. They would dictate how many square feet a day you should set, and then you'd have to go hide in the bathroom somewhere.
Right. There was some
So-
rules.
So in any case, he asked me, I was getting pretty burnt out.
Right.
I was working 10, 12-hour days for years and years and years. And I mean, I was a little league coach in town. I was,
Right.
I was involved
Very
with my
involved,
family,
yeah.
but I was starting to get tired of it.
Right.
Years of it. And he said, Dad, what do you say we try doing this together? And we've been doing it now for either 21 or 22 years. 89 is when we started working together.
Okay.
And we've gone through some serious ups and downs financially.
Yeah, there's a lot, you went through a couple booms and busts there.
Yeah, ironically,
Real estate-wise.
we started together in 89 and we said to one another, why didn't we do this before?
Yeah.
At the end of 89, the bottom fell out.
Yeah.
But we've done all right.
I started a business about then.
So
too.
you know.
And I always told people if we can make it now, we're going to make
That's
it
right.
anytime. But.
And the secret in business is keeping your overhead down.
Right.
If you can do that, you can survive.
That's right. You can wrap it together.
That's correct.
So you've been doing that for quite a while. Okay, so you mentioned that you were a Little League coach. What are some of the other things you did in town?
Well, I was on the fire department for quite some time. Again,
Okay.
I joined the fire department approximately a year